What is now the second month of the government shutdown, day 32 of the federal government of the United States inflicting pain upon its own citizens in a shutdown prompted by President Trump's demand for border wall money. This week, both Democrats and Republicans are planning to vote on dueling proposals to reopen the government. The Republican proposal, it turns out, is not the simple compromise that President Trump seemed to propose on Saturday, border wall money for him, temporary relief for some undocumented immigrants to win over Democrats. The legislation also includes what some Republican observers are even calling poison pills, tighter restrictions on who can apply for asylum status in the United States. And with no agreement between Democrats and Republicans, it seems all but assured that this government will remain closed, meaning 800,000 American workers, not to mention an untold number of contractors, will likely miss a second paycheck this Friday. CNN's Abby Phillip picks up the story from the White House.
President Trump and congressional Democrats locked in a game of chicken as the government shutdown drags on. The president taunting Democrats and promising not to back down, tweeting, "Without a wall, our country can never have border or national security," adding, "The Dems know this, but want to play political games. Must finally be done correctly, no cave." Trump still plans to deliver a State of the Union address at the Capitol next week, the White House says, even though House Speaker Nancy Pelosi asked him to postpone it, citing security concerns during the government shutdown.
She did that without any input from national security. In fact, she even said that Secret Service couldn't protect the speech, which is absolutely ridiculous.
The President of the United States!
To make their point, a White House official sending an email on Sunday asking the Sergeant-at-Arms to conduct a walkthrough for the speech. But that request was rejected. Officials say Trump's speechwriters are still working on his remarks, and they are considering alternative venues, including a campaign-style rally or a speech in the Republican-controlled Senate chamber, which could be complicated by Democrats. Meantime, both sides are still far apart on stopping the shutdown, with neither the Democrat nor Republican votes on plans to end the shutdown expected to succeed this week. And the text of the president's proposal released last night includes provisions advocates and Democrats are calling poison pills.
The president proposed is granting what he had already taken away. The DACA recipients had their protections. The temporary protected status, TPS, had their protection. The president took it away, and now he's saying, well, I'll give you this back temporarily if you give me a wall permanently.
Including a change that would force Central American children to seek asylum in their home country. And those attempting to seek asylum at the border would be sent back to the countries they fled. And there are some late in the evening developments happening in the Senate. We've learned, according to my colleagues on Capitol Hill, that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is going to allow a vote on Thursday on two different plans. One that has President Trump's $5.7 billion for the wall and the rest of the provisions he announced in his speech on Saturday, and the other that is a House-passed Democratic bill that reopens the government for a short period of time until February, but does not fund the wall. Now, Jake, neither of these proposals is expected to pass. They both would need 60 votes in order to do so. So while this is a small development, it does not signal that we are any closer to ending the shutdown, Jake.
All right, Abby Phillip, thanks so much. Phil, let me start with you. Is there any chance that Democrats could pick up 13 Republican votes for their bill to open the government, or Republicans could pick up 7 Democrats to pick up theirs? This could, obviously, them trying to reach the magic number 60.
Right. I mean, at some point, someone's going to have to pick up some votes somewhere, right? I mean, and it seems as though what it's coming down to is that Donald Trump is either going to have to sign off on Republicans who are willing to stand with him, balking, saying essentially, I'll sign a bill if you guys, join the Democratic effort on this, or if somehow the Democrats lose control of their caucus, which so far the Democrats have shown absolutely no indication that they plan to give the Republicans the vote that they want here. This shutdown was precipitated by Donald Trump suddenly changing his mind, saying, I want to make the fight over the wall at this point.
Right, the Senate already had passed a clean bill.
Exactly, which the House now has repeatedly, under Nancy Pelosi, passed as a pretty smart strategic political move. That said, if Donald Trump were to change his mind tomorrow and say, okay, to heck with it, we'll push this fight down the line, or we'll come up with something else that serves as a border, then the shutdown could end. He's shown absolutely no willingness to do so, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can seize upon enough things like this Covington Catholic fight to energize his base, to keep them distracted and keep the shutdown going and maintain the political will that is eroding for his presidency.
And one of the things that we'd been talking about last week on the show and on State of the Union also was Republicans talking about, well, if the president the president could corner Nancy Pelosi if he said, border wall money, open the government, but I'll give you protection for dreamers, permanent protection for dreamers, and permanent protection for DACA recipients. The president didn't offer permanent. No. He offered temporary. And then you find out that he has this, that they slipped in this thing that seems to have come from the mind of Stephen Miller, as you suggest.
It dramatically limits legal immigration to the United
States. For people
States.
applying for asylum
status. It makes it, especially from Central America, for children. It limits the number of applications. It limits the number of people who would be accepted. All of this, I think it is important to understand, though, is happening against the backdrop of the Supreme Court deciding not to take up the DACA repeal. For the longest time, the president had been saying that he was very confident that the Supreme Court was going to take the case. He was very confident that they were going to rule in his favor, quote, overwhelmingly, and that once they did that, he would have the leverage he needed in order to do some type of DACA wall deal. Well, that has dissipated,
They didn't take up the case.
They didn't take up the case, so that is no longer an option, which puts him in a much more difficult place.
What does that mean for the DACA recipients? So they have status indefinitely?
No, not indefinitely. I mean, the chances are that the court will revisit this and think about taking it up in the fall, which, by the way, means that a decision would come down in spring of 2020. Hello. But, in terms of this piece of legislation, it's not a good faith effort. It's not even really a starting point when you put those poison pills in it.
What do you think the president is going to ultimately do next week, assuming Nancy Pelosi doesn't give and let him do his State of the Union in the hall of the House of Representatives? Do you think he'll do it in the Senate? Will he hold a MAGA rally in Alabama? What do you think?
If I had to guess, right? If I were a betting woman, I would bet he does a MAGA rally somewhere in the heartland.
For the State of the Union?
I would not put it past the President of the United States. Not at all. He does things differently. He doesn't care about precedent. He wants to be his own person. And you know what? To heck with Congress. They're not working with him anyway. Yeah. Both sides are so double burrowed down in this, by the way. I mean, the way through, frankly, is just both sides to go big. Right? Go back to your $25 billion for the wall, and then go back to full protections for DACA recipients and the TPS people.
That's the January deal that he
That is the January deal,
that's
right?
That's not even big. That's just going back to the deal he could have had before he blew it up in a fit of pique the first time. Look, if the president does that and reverts to a letter to Congress and goes and gives a speech at the State of the Union to a rally, let's just christen that right now the State of the Disunion. It will be unprecedented for a president solely to play to his base simply because he needs the energy from the crowd to deliver a big speech. My guess is he tries to square the circle with the Senate. Look, I will not put anything past him. But the fact we're 32 days in, he wrote a book during the campaign called Crippled America. He's actively crippling America with the shutdown in month 2. He just made a half step towards recognizing the reality of a Democratic Congress and loaded up with poison pills that once again the theme seems to be reducing non-white immigration to this nation. And I have to note, you talked about the president maybe trying to rally conservatives on the Covington Catholic issue and other cultural stories. Your paper spoke with Trump voters in Michigan who are now blaming the president for the shutdown. One question, quote, what the expletive were we thinking? Another 2016 Trump voter said, quote, I was doing fine with him up until this government shutdown. It's ridiculous. You're not getting the wall built for $5 billion. And Mexico is not paying for it. We all know that, too. Meanwhile, it's starting to turn people like me away. This could ultimately really hurt him.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the approval numbers, where he was on December 21st, his disapproval was like 51.6%, and now it's like 55.6% in the real clear average of polls. He's seen a sharp spike in the number of people who say they disapprove of him. What he has done, however, over the course of his candidacy/presidency, is he has relied upon social issues like Covington Catholic to keep his base enthusiastic about him, while he does things that may not necessarily be totally beneficial to the base, like pass massive tax cuts that primarily help corporations. I would not be surprised if he is seizing on Covington Catholic in part. There's a variety of reasons why it's very, very squarely in his wheelhouse, but in part to try and reverse that trend.